VanMeter. Chris VanMeter, you can see here on the right. Chris VanMeter has won, I believe, 2, or is it just 1 Open?
I believe it's 2.
Okay,
actually.
I was thinking it was 2. And I think he first got noticed with his finish with Hivemind.
Yep. That deck definitely came out of nowhere and started rocking some Legacy Opens. We started seeing high finishes from Hivemind players. Seems a very degenerate deck to play.
Looking at the deck lists, well, I was going to say looking at the person power, that would make me feel a little bit more confident about Chris VanMeter. He's been very much a very big part of this. He's a level 8 player on our player club.
Yep.
But Matt Lilly does have some interesting things going on. He has more to interact with his opponent's creatures, and he has access to Thoughtseize.
So looks like we're going into the game. Matt leading off with a Polluted Delta. One of those really awesome cards. It really does seem like cheating to just be able to crack for any of... You know, you can take your blue, your black, your white. If you're off-splashing for Volcanic Islands, things like that. It's just very, very strong interaction.
A Swamp from Matt Lilly passes the turn.
So now we have Chris. Looks like he's got a grip of, I think that's Counterspell, Spellstarter Sprite, drops of Plains. Passes to Matt.
Matt draws.
See,
I
he's
see
got
a Stifle.
What do you think of Stifle in Legacy?
I like Stifle, but it is a card that it does not belong in many decks. I think that if you're running it with Stifle Wasteland, that's a great combination of cards, because you can actually get a really strong mana disruption package just incidentally.
Right.
But, I mean, I think I like Stifle better if your Stifle does something in your deck as well.
So, like a Stifle Knot deck?
Stifle Knot, for example.
Yep.
You know, Stifle Parallax, which is incredibly rare, but it exists.
Yeah, wow, that's going way back.
Oh, yeah. That would be Temporary Solution by famed deck builder Ben Dempsey, who made the Black Infect deck that we saw Dennis Fidegouris get into the top 8 of the last Pro Tour with.
Right on, right on. So it looks like both these players are content to just land go at each other for quite some time. In these kind of matchups, Adrian, do you feel it's a liability to blink first?
Not necessarily. One of the things about the question of blinking first, because Force of Will is in the format, we have the ability that mana is not necessarily the thing that's going to be tying things up. In non-Force of Will Control Wars, if you're the one that acts, you will probably be the one that gets hurt. But because of Force of Will, you can actually potentially act, get something into play, and be tapped out, and have Force of Will make it work.
That is certainly a fair point.
Is that a discard of Chrome Mox? I think he actually cast it and put something on it, but I missed that.
Yep. Chrome Mox does seem like an interesting choice for a deck like this. And we actually have verification now the Chrome Mox was discarded by Matt Lilly.
You know, I almost... that's really interesting. That kind of says that his hand is fairly strong. At least the spells in it are strong spells. He does have a reason to suspect that if he cast a Chrome Mox, you know, it could fall into a Spellstarter Sprite like we see there, but I don't know that I would worry about it. Chrome Mox in Matt Lilly's deck does possibly mean a Dark Confidant can come into play on turn 1 or a Bitter Blossom on turn 1. Obviously, Stoneforge Mystic can do it on turn 1 too, but I think the other two plays are far more punishing. There's not much difference between a turn 1 and a turn 2 Stoneforge Mystic, and there's a huge difference, I think, between a turn 1 and a turn 2 Dark Confidant or Bitter Blossom.
Yeah, being able to get that kind of creature or card advantage right out the gates will really put your opponent on the back foot starting off early, and if your deck relies on card advantage and just building up incremental leads, facing down a turn 1 Dark Confidant is just going to be real difficult.
Turn 1 Dark Confidant is one of my favorite things to do in Magic.
Seems good. So we have a Stifle from Matt Lilly on CVM's Fetch. So CVM fetches in response, Matt fetches on top of that.
I wonder if he's going to have another Stifle. That would be exciting.
That would be a blowout. That would be absolutely insane. So Matt gets a Tundra. Looks like he's got Underground, Plains, Swamp, Tundra, and the
second Stifle. Okay, now Chris VanMeter actually has to consider throwing Force of Wills at these Stifles.
Wow, That's harsh.
Now let's pretend that Chris VanMeter actually Force of Wills here and succeeds.
Yep. So
Matt might be like, that's fine, that's 2 cards.
Yeah, I mean, and that seems like an acceptable trade to make, especially if you're cutting your opponent on Force of Will.
Now, Matt Lilly has Wasteland in hand still, so if Chris doesn't actually play conservatively and get an island out of this, he can just get wasted on top of it.
Yeah, and it looks like Matt also, I think we saw a flash of a Batter Skull in his grip, which he could
just go the beatdown real quick.
He's got Daze in the grip. Like, Matt seems to have a lot of threats.
Chris is allowed to resolve his second fetch. He does get the conservative play here, the island, keeping him safe from a Wasteland. It is actually really smart to get that island. If an opponent is playing Stifle and stifling your lands, and there's a Spellstutter Strike for the Stifle, it is, and a Daze for the Sprite.
Matt really doesn't want Chris having lands this game.
Well, mana is a huge part of what makes the matchup work in control on control. So, wow. What I was going to say is that the conservative play of Island, if they are stifling your lands, you can presume that they have Wastelands in their deck.
That seems like a safe assumption, yes. So now we have...
I think we're going to see a main phase Brainstorm, which is one of the most popular times to cast it in Legacy, and often the most correct time.
You think so?
Absolutely.
Now, there's been talk lately, Adrian, about Brainstorm getting the axe.
That would be a wretched, terrible mistake.
You really think so? Like,
absolutely.
It just seems
the fact that it's
so degenerate.
The fact that it is ubiquitous and powerful does not mean that it is not awesome and fun.
Okay.
And we see a Stoneforge Mystic here from Chris VanMeter.
So what does he get? What does he have for targets? He has Sword of Feast and Famine.
And Batterskull.
Batterskull, yep. Seems...
I mean, essentially, Chris's deck is trying to be very close to Cawblade. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Edgar Flores were to see this list, if he might not just shift over to a build like this. Chris VanMeter's list also has one Elspeth, a card that Brian Kibler, when he was sitting there in your seat right now, was talking about being one he definitely wanted to be playing in Legacy.
It's a really great card on multiple levels. It allows you to generate guys to hold your swords. It allows you to jump over opposing blockers to connect with your swords. It just seems to enable a lot of the lines of attack that a deck like this wants to have.
Matt Lilly draws fourth land here. We know he has one from the Daze, but he also has another one in his hand.
Okay,
he has a Chrome Mox. He's going to get rid of something here. What is he? I couldn't see what. I see a Jace in his hand. I also see a Batterskull, like you said before. There's the Jace. He's going to perhaps bounce that Stoneforge Mystic, and I think he's going to Wasteland the Mutavault.
So cut him on land and also set back his development. Yep.
And now on the subsequent turn, Chris with no potential attackers, Jace in play, Chris can relay the Stoneforge Mystic and perhaps get another equipment, but then Matt Lilly will have an untapped, or a ready Jace in play.
Right. And it looks like there's a possible line for Matt of land Batterskull on the next turn. You don't see Batterskull hardcast really in any format.
So we see a Brainstorm again, and to answer your question from before, Nicholas, the thing about Brainstorm, incredibly powerful card, but one of the things that happens with Brainstorm is it helps make the better player win.
Okay.
The decisions that happen from even a single Brainstorm are so many that it is just an incredibly skill-testing card. And you can have all of this power and throw away the game with it.
It's definitely good to have cards in a format that enable the better player to stand a better chance of winning. I think the question that a lot of people have is because Brainstorm is so ubiquitous, much like, say, Force of Will, does the popularity of a card indicate that it should be banned?
I think that argument is actually kind of not good. And we see a Stoneforge Mystic from Chris VanMeter. He searches out a Batterskull from his deck. I think I don't like that argument, largely because in a format like Legacy, we still see a format where literally a 10% of the field deck would be the most popular deck in the format.
Absolutely.
And all of the blue decks do not run Brainstorm. Most of them do. This is absolutely true. But you do not see Brainstorm in a lot of the graveyard-based decks. Some of them do run it. Like, for example, Dredge is not one that runs Brainstorm, but it runs other blue cards.
Nope.
You do not see it in most Merfolk decks because it's just not right in the deck. You go to Matt Lilly's turn, he has another land or another mana.
Okay, so he has Force of Will.
He brainstorms with the Jace casting it, and I think we're going to see a Batterskull hit the table right now.
And that... Okay, nope, Thoughtseize.
He's going to maybe knock out one of those few equipment that are in there. We got a sword and we got a Batterskull.
So what do you take here?
Oh, boy. I'm not sure. I think I might take the Batterskull because the reusability of the Batterskull after it's been knocked out is actually really significant, whereas the Sword of Feast and Famine... he does have Swords to Plowshares. Matt Lilly has them in his deck to answer something that might put a Feast and Famine on. So I think I would probably take the Batterskull.
And Matt Lilly agrees with you. Batterskull in the bin. And it looks like CVM also has Caracas, Brainstorm, Swords, and Sword.
Now, Matt Lilly is not in danger of losing his Jace just yet. So he can actually sit... Oh, he even wastelands that land to make it even less likely that something could go wrong.
At this point, do you want to just protect Jace and build on that? Or do you think Matt's going to try to take a more aggressive stance in this match?
I think he should just protect Jace. I mean, every turn that a Jace sits out in Legacy is not just a nail in the coffin, but I feel like it's a stone on the already nailed coffin. You're just burying someone underneath stones. I feel like every turn I've seen a Jace in play, it's so terrible. It's for the opponent.
Is there really a worse feeling in Magic than getting Fate Sealed?
Yeah, I can think of a couple of ones.
I can think Mana Screw's pretty awful. I hate Mana Screw. But when your opponent just gets to look at the top card of your deck, you're like, no, you can have that. That's okay. It's just demoralizing.
I love demoralizing cards, honestly. I was actually going to say, facing down, one of my favorite decks is Stasis. It's not viable and hasn't been viable in a while. God. But when you're on the receiving end of Stasis, that's not exactly fun.
Stasis would be enough for me to cry. I would cry on Stasis Lock.
I don't even know that the lock would be necessary for me to be upset. It's not fun.
You don't get to untap anymore. It's cool. So we have a Tundra for CVM. He's going to crack in on Jace with Stoneforge
Jace goes
Mystic.
to 1. If Jace wants to bounce Stoneforge Mystic, it's going to have to empty itself out. Instead, we're likely to see a Fate Seal from Jace, or if he draws the land, it might just be a Brainstorm. There is the land. He can go Batterskull. Now, the thing is, if he just lays the Batterskull... Oh, and he brainstorms. I was going to say, if he just lays the Batterskull, a single removal spell will mean Jace will die.
That does seem like liability. Matt knows that Chris has the Swords to Plowshares. So maybe Matt was...
looking for a Force of Will, perhaps?
Looking for something to pitch to a Force of Will?
There's the 5th land. Lay the Batterskull? I don't know.
What other line... Or we're going to see the
Maybe
Bitter Blossom.
Maybe the Stoneforge. Oh, Bitter Blossom is pretty... Oh, Edict.
There it is.
Does he have a counterspell to fight this? I see a Force Well. Is there a blue spell in hand?
Forced Lab, Swords, and one other something. Forced Lab, Sword, and Sword.
And Edict works.
Yep. So it looks like we're going to see Bitter Blossom now for Matt Lilly.
Ouch.
Seems good.
Look at the incremental advantage that Matt will be gaining every turn.
Brainstorm every turn, have a dude every turn.
Chris VanMeter's outs to this, I would make the claim that he needs to resolve Sword of Feast and Famine, and then end of turn resolve Vendilion Click in order to get back in this game.
That would definitely be a good start.
There's part 1.
Yep. So we stick the sword for CVM. Matt's going to get a fairy. I think Matt probably brainstorms at this point, because if you can draw 1 card, brainstorming on top of that seems pretty solid.
Draws 1, 2, 3.
3 cards. Actually, it's only 3.
Fair enough. Stoneforge Mystic amongst the cards that Matt Lilly finds.
So now we're going to see, it looks like, there's the Stoneforge for Matt Lilly.
Matt has kept the Batterskull in his hand and has an Umezawa's GT in his deck. Chris VanMeter scoops. Doesn't really see much reason. I'm not sure if he scooped before he knew what Matt Lilly could get. I would have waited to see what Matt Lilly got and then scooped, just because I love information, and that little bit of information is only going to cost us a few seconds.
At the same, well, cost a few seconds to what end? I mean, how many turns do you wait? How much time do you spend when you know you're probably going to be playing a slow match?
No, you just wait to see what he fetches.
Okay.
That's it. Just wait to see what he has in his deck to target. So, for example, Chris knows that Matt has seen Sword of Feast and Famine and Batterskull. Chris has seen no equipment from Matt. He knows Matt has it, but he doesn't even know actually what equipment Matt gets.
Did Matt actually search when he Stoneforged?
He cast the Stoneforge, and then Chris conceded.
Okay, yep, that's a mistake.
Yeah.
That's definitely a mistake.
I mean, it's small. It's small, but I think it matters.
So now we're going to look at sideboards. Chris has 1 Wasteland, 2 Wrath, Crucible, Jitta, 4 Path, 3 Purify the Grave, aka Coffin Purge.
Yep, White Coffin Purge.
Elspeth Knight Errant, one of those, and 2 Krosan Grips.
Well, I think the first thing that's going to happen, Crucible of Worlds is not just going to come in because he's expecting to fight against a Stifle Wasteland opponent, but Crucible of Worlds is one of the most powerful cards in the slow, grindy blue mirrors. The ability to effectively lay a free land every turn and make every land that you draw just brainstorm and Jace fodder, so that your graveyard supplies you an endless stream of lands because of things like Flooded Strand and Misty Rainforest. That card is 100% coming in.
And that was player design. That was I think that was actually the first You Make the card way back in the day.
I think he also will bring in Krosan Grip, though, because having seen, first of all, the Bitter Blossom, but second of all, Stoneforge Mystic, there are definitely going to be targets for him to hit.
Absolutely. So for Matt Lilly's deck, for his sideboard, we have Surgical Extraction, 3 of those, 2 Spell Pierce, 1 Sword of Fire and Ice, 2 Engineered Explosives, 2 Enlightened Tutor, 2 Steel Sabotage, 1 Swords to Plowshares, and 2 Path to Exile. What do you think of... I'm sorry, that was not Enlightened Tutor, that was Engineered Plague.
Okay.
Because I can read.
Yay.
Yay, literacy. So what are we looking at for Matt Lilly as far as a sideboard plan for this game?
I think what's very likely is he's going to be Spell Piercing. He knows his opponent has a Brainstorm Force of Will deck. He's seen Swords to Plowshares. There are just a lot of instants that are going to matter. And we saw that fight over Stifle before. Imagine if he hadn't had to Daze, but he had actually had a Spell Pierce in hand. He would have been able to cast the Batterskull from his hand and then follow up on the next turn with the Jace and just not worry about it.
Which is just ridiculous.
I think we're just going to see Spell Pierce come in. And in both of these cases, I mean, Swords is real, Diabolic Edict is real, but I wouldn't be surprised if he shaves down his Swords and Edicts just a little bit. And that might be all that he does in order to change this. I do know a lot of people like to side out Force of Wills in this style of matchup, because Force of Wills for a lot of people are a loss of card economy. You're losing cards in order to gain the ability to force something through. I actually like Force of Will in a Dark Confidant deck, because if I go Dark Confidant, I really want to make sure when I tap out for my Dark Confidant that no Swords hits it, that it resolves through a potential counterspell, and then that loss of card economy I can make back up. So I hope that Matt Lilly doesn't try to side him out, but I know a lot of people like in control-ish fights to side out Force of Will. I don't think he should do that.
Seems reasonable. So looks like they're figuring out whether they're going to keep or not. In these kinds of matchups, Adrian, do you feel it's correct to mulligan more aggressively if you know that your opponent's going to be playing slowly or playing a more control-oriented deck?
In this, the big thing you need to do, you've got time in general, but not at the kind of premium you would expect. What I really want to have is a hand that can have a plan. If my hand can't have a plan, you're going to throw it away. Even if it's a card, you want to have some plan. Where is a line of play? If you don't have a line of play in your opening hand, it's not worth keeping, even if it's an extra card.
So we have islands on both sides. CVM drops Misty Rainforest. Passes to Matt Lilly. Matt with a grip of, looks like Chromox, Brainstorm. There's a Plains. And it looks, let me see, are we seeing a Stifle in there perhaps?
Actually, I'm not sure.
Matt passes back.
Brainstorm, Caracas, Misty Rainforest. I think that's a Mutavault, maybe?
Perhaps. Okay, so there's Misty Rainforest number 2 for Chris VanMeter. So let's see. Now Matt Lilly at this point, he's got the Brainstorm option. He's got, I do see a Stifle in his hand, so he does have that. Do you think he's going to try to cripple Chris with the Stifles like he did last game?
I need to see more of his hand yet. Like, what's he doing here with this? Is it going to be land? Okay, Chromox. He might toss a Stifle here.
Now, what does that telegraph to Chris if Matt is tossing Stifles?
Well,
to
we'll
his
see what he
Chromoxes?
tosses. Dark Confidant.
Oh,
wow, that was that was surprising. Does he have another Dark Confidant in there?
let's see.
Bitter Blossom.
Bitter Blossom. Would you have pitched Dark Confidant in that situation, or would you have pitched the Blossom and tried to ride?
Well, the thing about the difference between the two cards, right? Dark Confidant can be swords.
That's fair. All right, so we see a Brainstorm from CVM. Looks like one of those cards was... So we have a Batter Skull, Spell Pierce. Looks like Chris may have a Swords in his hand. And that Caracas. So he puts back Batter Skull and Caracas. Cracks the fetch.
And there's the Stifle.
There it is. All right. So Chris re-ups on the second fetch. Gets the Tundra.
And goodbye to Bitter Blossom.
Now what happened to that bitter? Oh, there's the Spell Pierce.
I'm sure it was verbally announced and it just, we couldn't hear them, so.
No, we certainly cannot. So CVM starts his turn.
He's got another Spell Snare in hand. I see a Sword of Feast and Famine. Probably Sword is going to come down. Oh, Vendilion Click main. That's fine. Just fine.
Yep, that seems viable. Matt's tapped out. We see Stifle, Brainstorm, Jitta, and Jace the Mind Sculptor on 3 land.
Depending on Chris's hand, I might take the Jite.
You think so?
Pardon me, Jace. I might take the Jace. Depending on his hand, I might take the Jace. The Brainstorm is a good card, but like if you take it, and then he drops a land, and you don't happen to have a Force of Will in hand, that Jace will take everything over.
Yep. It does seem like Jace that's what I would take in this situation. But he takes the Brainstorm.
Now, that might signal that Chris has Daze. Does he have Daze in his deck? No.
Nope.
So Force of Will would be the card that he might have, or he's just risking it and just being like, well, you hope you don't have it.
Yep.
I think we see a fetch land.
Okay.
So we're going to be option for Jace here. Now, Matt, not having the luxury of having Chris VanMeter's deck list, might be fearing a Daze. Chris does not have a Daze, but isn't something Matt knows.
Now, it seems interesting to play in such a way that your opponent would anticipate counter magic you don't have. Is that a correct strategic decision in this kind of matchup?
Well, I mean, I really don't like certain kinds of bluffs, because Matt is just basically forced to cast the Jace. I mean, that Jace is, if he doesn't cast it, I'll be really shocked.
He seems to be looking at that Jitta a lot. But nope, there's Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Show me the counter magic. If you don't have it, it's going to be rough. Oh, wow.
And wow, yep.
That I do not agree with one bit. What I was expecting there after that Jace resolved, I was expecting him to bounce the Vendilion Click or to +2 to peek at some top of the library. And instead, now Vendilion Click is just going to come in and kill the Jace.
So you're trading one of the most powerful cards in your deck for a Brainstorm.
Yeah.
Just cashing it in. That's an interesting line of play. That's not something I would have chosen.
Yeah, I don't like
do.
it. I don't like it one bit. Dead Jace. Jace is murdered.
There it is. CVM cracks a Misty Rainforest. So Chris is going to have 4 men up. We did see the Sword of Feast and Famine in his hand from earlier.
Jace
And a
of his
Jace
own.
of it. There it is, folks.
Goodbye. That's
Wow.
That's bad times.
So now we have a board position where Matt Lilly has a Stifle, he has a Jita, whatever he got off the Jace Brainstorm. The Bitter Blossom plan didn't pan out for him. So is that a Thoughtseize here? So let's see. Okay, so CVM has Snapcaster, Sword, Spell Pierce, Counterspell. Ugh.
Wow.
That's not what you want to see. That's definitely
Takes
not
the
what you
sword.
want to see.
I will call this game over. The way that this game does not end in Chris's victory is if Chris is reckless. He would have to be very reckless to make this game go any other way than his victory.
So now we see, okay, there's Diabolic Edicts.
No big deal. The real clock here is Jace.
At what point do you think CVM just starts Fate Sealing Matt to try to ultimate him out?
I don't even actually go there. He goes for the draw. Matt Lilly stifles it.
Yep.
Well, that's better than Chris brainstorming, I guess, but it is still the same card advantage.
Right, right. So you don't think Jace the ultimate plan is
I think it's slow. I would brainstorm several times, and after brainstorming several times, then once my hand was comfortably settled, start Fate Sealing. I think a lot of players Fate Seal more aggressively than me, and they could well be right to be more aggressive than I am.
Sure.
Maybe I'm just too in love with those extra cards.
Well, I mean, drawing cards is possibly one of the best things you can do in the game.
There's an Umezawa's Jite, Jite
certainly
down.
Understand the appeal. So there's a Jita with nothing to put it on against an untapped Chris VanMeter. Oh, we see
Spell Snare
on the Jita.
I believe he has Force of Will, and I can't remember the other card. Oh, Snapcaster Mage.
Yep. And there's a
And
Swords to Plowshares.
I'll just brainstorm here, build up those cards. Because, I mean, what you really want, and Stifle again. And again,
My goodness.
it's better for Matt than letting the Jace brainstorm. But from Chris's perspective, he is still whittling away the cards of Matt Lilly for no cost.
Exactly. So we have Matt Lilly taking 2 from a Mute Vault hit.
Now what Matt needs here is to top deck something great. And have Chris not have the ability to force a will in. But we know he has some blue spells in hand.
Yep, he does. I think we see a counterspell, the ugly Tempest art counterspell.
Oh, I hate that art.
That was...
Ice Age all the way. Stoneforge Mystic. Is the Spell Snare still in his hand? He's got one in the yard. He's got Snapcaster, but not enough mana to Snapcaster Spell Snare. So it could be just straight up counter spell.
Which is a perfectly reasonable line of play. Now, Chris also does have the Swords to Plowshares in his hand.
It's still pretty risky. I mean, he already... He might have to deal then with a Batterskull. He does have 2 swords, but then the Batterskull can reset itself.
Okay.
Counterspell seems just fine. He's got a Jace to refill. And can he finally activate the Brainstorm successfully?
One hopes.
Will it finally happen? Will Stifle not stop this activated Brainstorm? Finally!
There it
it's the
is.
Brainstorm. Woo!
He gets to draw the cards. So it looks like he sees
He's got a flooded strand to get rid of the junk, whatever the junk might be.
That's just the best feeling in the world when you get to brainstorm and then just, I don't want these. Crack a fetch. Let's see something else.
Did you say Cracker Fetch?
I hope not. So we have Wasteland on
just
Underground
whittling
Sea.
down Matt Lilly. I mean, right
Does
now,
not attack with the Mutavault at this point.
that mana is good. Matt Lilly says go. A little gesture of the hand. We see a draw from Chris VanMeter. There's another. Well, actually, that's the same Flooded Strand from before.
He's got a Flooded Strand, Batterskull.
I think I like, actually, depends on what's one card down, if he likes it or not. He's going to go Brainstorm now.
Sure, seems reasonable.
2 fresh new cards. What is he going to put back?
I think we see a Riptide Laboratory in the hands of Chris VanMeter. That seems like a perfectly viable card when you have a Snapcaster in the grip. Puts back... He doesn't want that Batterskull. So at this point, does he lab? Or does he Flooded Strand?
I think he strands. If he doesn't want the Batterskull, he doesn't want the Batterskull.
That seems perfectly reasonable.
His hand is nearly sculpted to the point where he can consider Fate Sealing.
And Matt just scoops it up. So we're now at 1-1. Matt Lilly is going to be on the play. Seems like Stifle has been a very defining card in this matchup thus far. You know, Matt Lilly's been using them very aggressively. He's been shutting off fetch land activations.
Absolutely.
He's been shutting off Jace the Mind Sculptor activations. It does seem like a card that can really break your opponent on a lot of different angles.
I think that one of the things that that Matt did there is he didn't respect the power of having a Jace in play. He had it in play. I think this game was his to